July 10th, 2017. A British model steps off a plane at Milan's Linite airport, thinking she's headed for a legitimate photo shoot. 20-year-old Chloe Ayling was no stranger to travel. Her agency had booked her for international gigs before. But this job was different. Within an hour of arriving, she'd vanish without a trace. The photo shoot location, a quiet studio tucked behind a Milanese storefront, was in fact a carefully staged trap. As Chloe walked in, two men ambushed her from behind, injecting her with ketamine. She fell limp almost instantly. By the time she came to, she was stuffed inside a duffel bag, shoved into the back of a car, and driven out of the city. At first glance, this might seem like the work of a chaotic lone wolf, but what police would soon uncover was far more disturbing. A kidnapping engineered with surgical precision, involving burner phones, encrypted email accounts, and a digital auction on the dark web. The kidnappers left no fingerprints, no DNA, yet somehow they wanted to be known. 6 days later, Ayling would emerge barefoot and shaken, telling Italian consulate staff she'd been kidnapped by a group calling itself the Black Death Organization, a mysterious cyber syndicate allegedly involved in trafficking women to the highest bidder. The story made global headlines, but so did the doubts. People asked, how could a woman be kidnapped, then casually walk free? Was she telling the truth? Or was there something more twisted behind it all? You probably can't even imagine the full scale of it. So before we get started, I'll ask you to subscribe to the channel and put a like on the video if you really like what I'm doing. And once you're finished watching, tell me in the comments, did justice prevail? Or did this case leave you with more questions than answers? Because this is the story of how one woman walked straight into a nightmare hidden behind a camera lens. The captors wasted no time. Within hours, Chloe Ayling had been driven over 120 miles northwest to a secluded farmhouse near Turin. There, one of the kidnappers, a 30-year-old Polish national named Łukasz Herba, made the first direct contact. He introduced himself as a representative of the Black Death Group. His voice was cold, his words were rehearsed. According to Ayling, he told her she was now the property of a powerful organization and her life was worth exactly 300,000 euros. If her modeling agency or family failed to pay, she would be sold online as a sex slave. To drive the message home, Herba provided a ransom note written in English, addressed to Ayling's agent. The language was carefully crafted to sound like the voice of a sinister syndicate. It warned against contacting police. It stated that Ayling would be auctioned on the dark web in 20 days unless payment was received. The letter also claimed she had been kidnapped for slavery, but would be spared because she was a young mother. A fact Herba allegedly learned after checking her Instagram during her captivity. But behind the theatrics of the message, something felt off. There was no deep web listing, no cryptographic signatures, no sounds of a broader network in play. Investigators would later suspect that the Black Death persona was a smokescreen, an invention by Herba, cobbled together from online lore designed to instill fear and complicate the trail. Still, the threat was real. Ayling was drugged, handcuffed, and held prisoner for nearly a week. She wasn't chained, but every door was locked. The captors monitored her movements, dictated her meals, and told her that any escape attempt would result in death. It wasn't clear if there really was a syndicate, but she had no way of knowing that. What would drive a man to create a fantasy so elaborate and so cruel? The house where Chloe Ayling was held sat deep in the countryside, nestled among the wooded hills of View near Turin. It was remote, isolated, and soundproof. Inside, the walls were bare, the windows shuttered, and for 6 long days, Chloe was its only captive. Herba provided basic necessities, food, water, clothes, and even allowed her limited access to her own belongings. but every gesture of kindness came laced with menace. He told her that he could make her life easier if she obeyed. If she tried to escape, the Black Death would punish her, and her body would never be found. Chloe later told investigators that Herba kept repeating a strange contradiction, that he was protecting her from being sold to someone worse. He claimed he had canceled the online auction and that she should be grateful, but she had never seen any auction page, only his word. At one point, Herba took her outside for a short walk in the garden, a chilling moment of calm in the middle of captivity. She didn't dare run. Every movement felt like it was being tested. One night, she was given wine and told to relax. Then Herba began making advances. When she resisted, he backed off, but the boundary between captor and manipulator had blurred. He wasn't acting like a professional criminal. He was acting like someone playing a role, and writing new lines as he went. It became increasingly clear. The rules of this kidnapping were being invented in real time. On the sixth day, without warning, Herba drove Chloe to the British consulate in Milan. He handed her over calmly and walked away. She was barefoot, confused, disoriented, and when police took her statement, what she told them would only deepen the mystery. Why would a kidnapper release his victim and then stick around? The man behind the kidnapping was no shadowy kingpin. Łukasz Herba, a Polish-born computer technician living in the UK, cut a strange figure. He wasn't rich, he wasn't connected to organized crime, but what he lacked in sophistication, he made up for in obsession. Herba lived in a fantasy world where fact and fiction blended, a man fascinated with dark web conspiracies, fake identities, and the performance of being dangerous. When Italian authorities arrested him 2 days after Ayling's release, they found his laptop filled with disturbing content. There were drafts of ransom letters, staged images of bound women, and numerous references to the so-called Black Death group. But investigators quickly realized there was no actual Black Death, at least not in the form Herba described. It was a boogeyman he'd built from online rumors and horror forums. His version of reality was stitched together like fan fiction, terrifying but incoherent under scrutiny. Herba told police that he had orchestrated the kidnapping as part of a plan to raise awareness about human trafficking. He said he wanted to become famous. He even claimed that Chloe Ayling was in on it, a willing participant in a twisted publicity stunt. But the evidence said otherwise. Surveillance footage showed Herba buying tools, scoping out the Milan studio, and renting the remote house weeks in advance. His brother, Michal Herba, would later be linked to logistics and travel connected to the abduction. In the farmhouse, police discovered ketamine vials, handcuffs, and a pair of sneakers with traces of Ayling's DNA. This wasn't a fantasy, it was a calculated operation, and Herba was its mastermind. His claims of innocence unraveled fast. So why try to pin the whole thing on his victim, and why try to turn himself into a savior? Chloe Ayling's sudden release was as perplexing as her abduction. On July 17th, Herba dropped her outside the British consulate in Milan, calmly handed her over, and vanished. When police questioned her, she described the ordeal in vivid detail, but almost immediately her story drew skepticism. She hadn't tried to escape. She'd reportedly shared meals with her captor, even walked hand in hand through a supermarket days before her release, a moment caught on CCTV. To some, it didn't add up. Italian investigators took her claims seriously. But as the media got hold of the details, the narrative began to unravel in the public eye. Tabloids latched onto inconsistencies. Why hadn't she screamed in the store? Why did she post to Instagram so soon after being freed? Why was there no proof of the alleged dark web auction? The questions fed rumors that Ayling had staged the whole event. Her modeling photos were dragged through the press. Some commentators accused her of seeking fame, while others called the entire case a hoax. But back in Milan, police had Herba in custody, and he wasn't walking free. His version of events constantly shifted. First, he claimed to be working alone. Then, he blamed a syndicate. Then, bizarrely, he said he had fallen in love with Ayling during her captivity. This confession blurred the line between delusion and manipulation. Prosecutors began building a case that Herba had staged the whole kidnapping, not as performance art, but as a failed extortion plot. Ayling's cooperation with police never wavered, and soon forensic evidence would begin to catch up with the story. But was Herba truly acting alone, or was there someone else quietly pulling strings in the background? The answer came, in part, through digital forensics. Italian and British investigators, working in tandem, traced encrypted emails used during the ransom communications. All the data pointed to one name, Michal Konrad Herba, Lukasz's older brother. A man with no criminal record, Michal had flown from the UK to Milan just days before the kidnapping. He used a burner phone, rented a black Jeep Renegade, the same model caught on traffic cameras leaving the studio where Ayling was abducted, and disappeared back to the UK shortly after Chloe was released. Arrested in Birmingham and extradited to Italy, Michal denied any involvement. But the evidence painted a different picture. Hotel records, flight logs, and CCTV placed him in Milan during the critical 48-hour window. Surveillance footage also showed the brothers meeting in the days before and after the abduction. Prosecutors argued that Michal had played a key logistical role, helping scout the fake studio, secure the rental vehicle, and plan escape routes. Meanwhile, emails from the supposed Black Death group were traced to IP addresses tied to Herba's home. No anonymizing network, no deep web, just clumsy copy-paste fear tactics, drawn from myth. Even the name Black Death was lifted from urban legends, floating around trafficking forums online, a chilling but fictional syndicate once falsely linked to Eastern Europe. Police also found a handwritten itinerary for the kidnapping in Lukasz Herba's notebook, complete with timestamps, pickup locations, and a note reminding him to erase GPS history. This wasn't a grand syndicate. It was a two-man scheme, built on manipulation, staged theatrics, and a desperate gamble that somehow backfired. But could two brothers with no mafia ties really think they'd get away with this? By 2018, the case had reached its legal climax in a Milan courtroom. Prosecutors presented a disturbing yet meticulously documented timeline. Chloe Ayling's testimony was firm. She recounted the injection, the bag, the journey, the remote house, the threats, the confusion, and the bizarre final release. But the defense threw everything back at her. Herba's lawyers claimed the event was a mutual plan between model and captor, a fake kidnapping for media exposure, allegedly agreed upon to launch her career with shock value. They cited her apparent calmness in public, her interactions with Herba, and the media frenzy she embraced afterward. Herba doubled down, taking the stand to repeat the claim that Chloe was in on it. His testimony was erratic, sometimes contradictory. He claimed he wanted to be famous and compared himself to actors who play villains in films. He even described being inspired by the Dexter series, a fictional serial killer who hides in plain sight. But then came the hard evidence. Ayling's DNA on the handcuffs, the ketamine found in Herba's vehicle, witnesses from the modeling agency who confirmed the fake photoshoot booking, data from Herba's laptop showing online searches about chloroform, restraints, and human trafficking days before the abduction. The judge wasn't swayed by Herba's theatrics. In June 2018, Lukasz Herba was sentenced to 16 years and 9 months in prison. His brother Michal, extradited later, was also convicted and sentenced to over 5 years. The court called the case grave and premeditated, describing Ayling as a victim of psychological and physical coercion. But despite the guilty verdicts, the questions and headlines didn't stop. What's the price of surviving a crime when half the world doesn't believe you? Long after the court doors closed, Chloe Ayling's real battle was just beginning. Tabloid headlines accused her of being an Instagram faker, a publicity seeker, even a kidnap hoaxer. Every photo she posted, every media appearance she made, including her decision to appear on Celebrity Big Brother, was met with backlash. The louder she tried to defend her story, the more people seemed to doubt it. But beneath the noise was a very real trauma. Ayling was diagnosed with PTSD. She spoke openly about the nightmares, the therapy, and the daily reminders of what she endured. Her critics never disappeared, but neither did the facts. The court's ruling had been clear. She was kidnapped, drugged, and manipulated by men who staged a dark web fantasy in the real world. She had been a pawn in someone else's twisted game, and yet she was treated like the villain. Even now, the case is a blueprint for how public perception can warp justice. Ayling's name will always be linked to the sex slave hoax narrative, no matter how definitively that narrative was debunked. Her kidnappers were convicted. The physical evidence was overwhelming. And yet the doubt persists, a disturbing reminder of how media can muddy even the clearest of truths. The Herba brothers are both behind bars, but questions remain. Were there earlier attempts? Was this the first woman they targeted, or just the first whose case got caught? This story isn't just about a kidnapping. It's about a digital age crime, born from fantasy but executed with terrifying precision. It's about how easy it is to manufacture a lie, and how hard it is to prove the truth once people stop listening. This empire was collapsed, but as soon as one is destroyed, a new one is born. Somewhere right now, a new trafficking scheme is forming, and we have to fight it.